What's up, everybody? Just wanted to put a little video together on how I like to rebuild my shocks. I like to pretty much build them with zero repound, zero compression. This is the shock out of my GFRP Apollo drag car. I also use the same rebuild process for all my touring cars as well. One of the things that leads to air getting inside of your shock is during an impact, the shaft will move left to right, maybe a little hard to see, but when it does, it'll let air get into the shock. Whenever the shock has air in it, it has a swishing sound. Maybe kind of hard to hear, but it kind of sounds like water swashing around in your mouth. I like to rebuild these things before every big race, just to make sure that they're good to go. Suspensions are very important for going straight. Also today, I'll probably be switching over to the black springs that Quasi-Speed has came out with, just because I like the car to look a little more uniform and get a little bit of color off the car. Also, whenever I rebuild shocks, I always make sure that I have an extra set of diaphragms on hand, just in case the old ones have swelled from the silicone fluid. So to start off, what I will do is just drain the shocks. I'm going to be putting the same fluid back in the shocks, so I'm really not worried about getting 100% of the fluid out. Just change these before going to King of Smokies, so they are pretty clean. Currently right now for this car, I'm running the aluminum 4-hole pistons. Once everything is drained out, throw them in a shock holder. Lots of companies make shock holders. This is a T-Works. It's pretty cool. It's got multiple different sizes. Just holds the shocks upright while you're doing it. Makes life a little easier. Start off with just topping each shock off. Not all the way. Give myself a little room. That way I can cycle the piston. Try to get as much air out of there as possible. So whenever I cycle the piston, what I'll do is I'll bring it all the way up until it's right at the top of the fluid. I'll usually pull it down hard a few times. Make sure to twist it, get any air bubbles out that shouldn't be there. Do that for both shocks. Also make sure that the lower sill's not leaking. The lower sill happens to be leaking. I would replace that as well. I will add a little more fluid, bring it up to the top level. Do another cycle on each shock just to make sure the air is out of them. Whenever I'm purging the bubbles, I always like to leave the piston at the bottom of the shock body. While that waits, I'll go ahead and check out my diaphragms. If I ever have to push the diaphragm out with anything such as a pick, I automatically assume that I punctured it, and I'll just go ahead and replace it. These ones look pretty good. Like I said, I just rebuilt the shocks before King of the Smokies. So they've only probably got, 40 passes on them, maybe. This one looks good as well. So I'll probably clean these up and reuse them. If I run into any issues, I'll still go ahead and replace them. I will go ahead and top these off. Whenever I top them off fully, I like the level of the fluid to be higher than the body of the shock. And we'll go ahead and let those sit and air out. I usually give them about 5 minutes, find something else to do. So when we go into actually putting the diaphragm on the shock, what I will do to try to build this shock dead, which is a little tricky with this shock, as the body and the shaft are different sizes. It doesn't come all the way up to the top as it normally would. I push the shaft all the way to the top. Make sure that I've got more fluid than the body itself. I will lay that cap in from the side. I'll take my ball driver and I will press it in, making sure that it pushes all the fluid out and does not let any air get in. Having that fluid over the top of the shock is what's going to keep you from getting air into the system whenever you do this. Once it's fully seated, I'll take the cap, screw it on, grab my shock pliers, make sure it's nice and tight. Then I will cycle a shock, make sure that there's no air. So what I do to make sure this shock is dead is I'll usually pump it a couple times, make sure that there's no return. If there was any type of rebound in this, whenever you pumped it, it would come back out. Then I'll do the opposite, make sure whenever I pump it out, it doesn't go back in. As you can see, that shock is dead for both rebound and compression. Grab the other shock, we'll do the same thing. Press the shaft all the way up to the top as far as it'll go. Take the diaphragm, set it on the edge. Grab my driver, work it around, make sure no air gets inside. It's fully seated. Throw the top on it. Check it for cycle, and it's dead as well. Clean the shocks up. Like I said, if you're going to spray the shocks with anything, I like to use Worth. Just spray the outside, make sure to get all the fluid off. Really, this will just keep the dirt from sticking to it. You've got shock fluid on the outside of your shock, it will get dirty very quickly. It's one good way to tell if a shock is blown out. Before I rebuild these, I always do measure the shafts. I did measure them, didn't show it, but measure From the body to the end of the cup, both of these shocks are built at about 14 millimeters. Try to get as close as possible. That way the shocks have the same amount of travel. It also helps when rebuilding it for your dampening. Now, as stated, going with the quasi-speed shocks. These are the 1.35s. It's what I'm currently running right now. The purples that came off the car are 7. What's really cool about these springs is they're labeled. So every spring has a label on there. If I can find the one I need. So I'll put the 7-pound springs in there, which are the same as my purples. Looks like the kit comes with 5-pound through 10-pound, and they all have a pretty cool label on the end of them that shows you what they are. Whenever I use a spring with a label on it, I always like to put the label down. Makes it a little easier to tell which spring's in the car. I put it down. Whenever I put the retainer in, you can always check to see the weight of the spring in the retainer. That's it, guys. Some brand new shocks. Gonna throw these back on the car, get out and do some testing at the end of the year, get ready for next season. If there's any other videos you want to see, just throw it down in the comments. I'll start doing some RC content for y'all guys. A lot of new guys out there. And the more people we can help, the better the scene's going to be. And the more the scene will grow. Thank y'all for joining us. Like and subscribe.